Good evening and welcome to Shaw Cable's Nelson Nightline live phone-in talk show. I'm Morrie Zaitlin and I'll be your host tonight along with my regular co-host Marianne. Tonight's show takes a more informal twist from our regular fare of looking at community issues on Nelson Nightline. We're going to explore the realm of gonzo journalism and column writing. With us in the studio, we are fortunate to have three of the Kootenai's most widely read local columnists. John Betts, the NDN's correspondent and creator of his Gumshoe of the Improbable Column. Dr. Bill Saliken, BDS, who writes Mental Flossing Column regular for the NDN and other interior BC publications. And Steve Thornton, a longtime local writer and columnist and former NDN staff writer. Before we start, I'd like to introduce our guests and say hello to my co-host, Marianne Bond. Marianne, hi.
Hi, Morrie.
Bill, Steve, John, how do you do?
Hi, Morrie.
Well, we're going to start, I guess, with a guy with a bow tie here.
It must be me.
That's you. Tonight's show a little more informal. Maybe, John, you could just, before we get really into things, tell us a little bit how you got into writing as a whole and how you got your column started.
Basically, as a relief from the reporting I was doing at the courthouse, I thought things were really weird there, so going to outer space for my story seemed like a nice spot to go. So that's kind of what got me started. It became a distraction, and to be honest with you, now I'm getting a bit worried because I'm beginning to believe my columns.
Yes. And Steve, you've got a long-time career in journalism. You want to just briefly go over how you got into it and how you got into column writing?
Well, I fell into journalism accidentally. I always wanted to be a writer. I guess I started writing when I was about 8 years old. And journalism seemed to be a good way to pay the rent and not have to do any work. I found out I was wrong. I didn't get the rent paid, but I still didn't have to do any work. So it kind of worked out that way. In about 1985, I worked for the Daily News at the time, and Steen Jorgensen, the publisher, then asked me to do a column on entertainment. Let the folks know what was happening around town every week, and I started that, but I found that I didn't really have much to say about entertainment because I didn't really care what was going on around town, so I started making up stories and taking little snatches out of my life and eroding my history, as it were, to create these columns that sort of took on a life of their own. And now I can't get away from them.
Great, Steve. And Bill, you're a dentist. How did you get into this business?
Well, actually, you're responsible for it.
Oh, no.
Yeah, well, that's basically how I got into it, because when you were editor of the paper, you asked me to do a column, and I first resisted like hell. And then I finally succumbed to it, and thinking that if a deadline was going to be a bummer, I'd probably not do it anymore, but I haven't found that to be much of a problem, so it's been quite fun.
Great, great.
And now you're getting syndicated. I hear
Well,
you're running up in Clearwater. And
well, that's because editors keep leaving Nelson and taking me with them.
But you are running in the Clearwater paper.
Yes, in the Clearwater Times, yeah.
Excellent.
Steve, you publish in what publications here?
Kootenai Review, the Express, and I don't know, Kootenai Business Journal.
Now
most of my humorous writing is in the Kootenai Review these days, though.
Great. And you're just with the NDN right now?
Well, no one else will take my material. I mean, what it boils down to. I tried to flog this to some pretty weird people, but no, it's out there. There are some publications that are interested. They don't pay anything for the stuff, so I might as well keep it at home for the time being.
You do a radio spot though too, don't you, John?
Yeah, not on this theme though. It's on Nelson, so it's definitely tame compared to the topics I tackle here for this column. That's just the I think I'm called the Nelson Community Correspondent. So we have little chats about Nelson, and we talk a bit about. We kind of keep on the light and bright side, but we also bring up issues that are, we did the thing on the referendum over the power plant, a few things like that, and talk about that. So.
And that's on CBC Daybreak?
That's on the Almanac program, actually, that one comes on. And I think it's once a month they phone me up and say, ask how the weather is. And I go through the usual routine, and actually sometimes get down to some nice issues. So.
I've heard it. It's excellent. It's
Thank
great.
you.
Now, Bill, you started, not with me really, you were writing a newsletter. Tell us about that.
Well, I'd prefer not to, but well, about 5 or 6 years ago, I started writing more as a joke, sending out a little newsletter to a bunch of friends, former university buddies, and that people with a taste for really bizarre stuff, and hence the Joe G. Nadley Center for the Study of Decidedly Aberrant Behavior was formed.
Right.
With Joe G. Nadley and a bunch of his schizophrenic friends. Actually, Joe G. is schizophrenic. And you should come down there one day and shake hands once and meet about 17 people.
With one hand.
Oh, yeah.
And what is the society set up to do?
Well, it's designed mostly to study research topics that have never really been researched before.
For instance.
Well, if you mail a boomerang, do you really have to put a return address on it?
What do people think about that sort of column?
Well, the people that I send this stuff to, they kind of like it, and just, we ask all sorts of questions, like when the guy that invented condoms died, did he leave any heirs?
And you have other regular people or people within your column. What are some
Well,
of
I've
the
got
names
some.
of them?
Well, Joe G. He runs the whole thing there and everything.
He's the president and chairman
he's
of the
got
society.
Luke Warmwater is the psychic newscaster. He always does newscasts of roughly about 2 years from now. He's pretty good actually. He can see only 2 years into the future and everything. So when he gets senile, I'm afraid that he's going to only be able to predict things that happened 2 years ago. But we'll wait for that and everything. We've got the Reverend J.D. Buck Miser. He's our televangelist.
Right.
He took over from a guy named Reverend Arnie Gedden. When Arnie moved on to, I don't know where he moved on to.
May he rest in peace.
Yeah, exactly. And we've got a guy named Terwilliger T. Topsoil. He's sort of an advice columnist, but he doesn't surface all that often. He's kind of on a hiatus right now.
And these are regular contributors within your column. I guess.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
What sort of feedback do you get from people in the dental chair? I know. I'm sure when they read your column and they come into the office, are you getting feedback from them?
No, none of which is understandable. Exactly, yeah. But I go by the motto that 2 monologues make a dialogue, so it's okay.
Yes. How about you, Steve? You've got some regular people within your column, the Coffee Break column. Name some of them and how they came about.
Well, there's Bald Harold is a character that I just he popped out of thin air when I needed somebody. And I can't remember who else.
Henny.
Henny.
Yeah,
Oh, Henny. Yeah, it was. For some reason, I was thinking of Henny
Youngman?
Youngman.
Yeah.
And I decided not to make him Jewish because I didn't know how much fun I was going to make of him, and I didn't. I didn't want to take any chances on that score, so I just made him Henny.
Right.
And
Banana Bob?
Banana Bob, yes.
I knew a Banana Anna. She changed her name
Actually,
to Banana Anna.
Banana Bob's my brother, so he's a real character. I didn't make him up.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, he was sorry to find that out too.
He did.
He didn't know he was related to me.
And I know your columns also, like in the Express, you've done the rock columns, but I've never understood what was happening in rock scene when I read your columns till the last
that's because
time.
I never understood what was happening in the rock scene either. I didn't much. Well, actually, I don't much like music. So I was the ideal person to write a music column, obviously, because I'm not going to be biased. But then again, I didn't have anything to say about it either, so I made up a bar called the Conquistador, and for once and for all, I'll tell everybody there is no Conquistador.
I knew a lot of people were trying to find that. It sounded like a great place to be.
Yeah, I'm sorry to let the cat out of the bag, but I still get asked that. as a
Or
matter
is
of
the
fact.
Conquistador?
Yeah, and characters like Lazy Eddie and Norman Bates
Norman Bates from,
from the
Psycho.
Conquistador.
who is he?
He was, I don't know, he was somebody else, but he changed his name to Norman Bates because,
Isn't that the character you said in Psycho?
yes, Norman Bates was the psycho character who dressed up like his mother and stabbed, what's her name, in the shower. And so he, I guess he aspired to a certain kind of notoriety.
Now, John, you take a little different tract on your columns. It's again a particular column about the weird and wonderful world of UFOs and other worldly things. How did you come into writing that sort of column? Is this your personal thing that you like to get into?
Well, to be honest with you, first of all, none of my characters are fictional, which is worrisome, because the stories that I get from them. But one thing led to another. I mean, it's a pretty rich vein once you get just out on the fringes a little bit. And I was surprised how, investigating an interest in the crop circle phenomenon led to a whole other host of other related I don't know what you call them, just outside on the edge of things. And that led to some investigations all across North America, and including a few just close to home here. There's 3 or 4 haunted pubs and restaurants just on the West Arm, and that led to a discussion of everything from witchcraft to spirit cleansing. And plus, I've promised some members of owners of one of the pubs that I will attempt a spirit rescue this spring on an apparent 7-year-old that's been residing upstairs since it died back at the turn of the century. If I come back all scorched and singed, it didn't work. So there are some. Don't try this at home, okay? I won't be giving out instructions on this, but like I say, my characters are real, and as I said at the beginning of the program, it's a little disconcerting because when you start to believe them, then there is a kind of shift in what you're calling real and where consciousness really is at and where the planet's at. And occasionally I have to take a break from this column and go back to writing the normal drudgery because it becomes a relief. So that's one of my excuses for not producing much in the last month or so, is I've been kind of overwhelmed with the normal thing. But sooner or later, it's like ill-fitting underwear. You have to deal with it sooner or later. So I'll be back.
You enjoy that?
Ill-fitting underwear?
No, writing your column and learning about these
It's
paranormal.
great. No, it's either enough to scare you right off the topic or right off the planet, or enough to think that the world is really a wonderful place. It's just we just don't have the whole picture.
I have to ask you this. Have you seen a UFO yourself?
I think I did when I was young. I also thought I saw ghosts and a number of things, but I became quite rational. Well, no, I didn't. But at some point, I dismissed these phenomena over my lifetime, and to say now, I haven't really been visited by spirits. I haven't been abducted, contacted, or whatever the things that are happening to people all over North America so far, and I don't think I want to be. It's weird enough just writing about this stuff without actually having that on your plate. If a nuts and bolt flying saucer landed in my yard, I don't know what I'd do. It'd be hard to go back to do the dishes again, I know that. But we're real.
What kind of reaction have you had to your column?
I'm surprised at the tolerance in the general public that they actually are really interested in this stuff. It seems to be a latent thing waiting to be come out. The mainstream press won't touch it. I've tried to file the Canadian press. I've tried to file some very straight sounding stories about speakers who put out books and talked about these topics, and their line to me is, well, John, if you get a moose running down the main street in Nelson, file that, but don't tell us about the crop circles. Sorry.
Bill, you take a lot of humor from the political world, and we've got on camera here, I think if Tony can cue on to it, one of your columns you did was on the Kim Campbell hangar.
Can I get a shot of that?
Is it on?
Yeah, the idea was fun, and that one worked really well simply because of the timing. I wrote that on a Sunday night. We took the picture on a Tuesday, and it was on Wednesday that Kim Campbell herself announced that she was going to seek the leadership of the Conservative Party, so that one went over really well. Politics is a great place to draw humor from. These guys, well, they give you an endless sort of supply of it and everything. You have trouble sometimes not laughing at them. They tend to, I think they're actually elected to keep us laughing. They certainly don't do anything justifiably serious, and you just got to keep on laughing at them. That's all.
For a long time I felt that we'd be better off if comedians ran the government, so maybe it would be a good thing to just have them all change places.
Might not be a bad idea. Maybe they have, and we just haven't known.
We don't know.
You know, maybe they are comedians.
The good-looking ones get on stage and
Exactly, and we just keep expecting serious stuff out of them, and you know, and they're saying that they're not saying, but they're trying to get us to understand that, you know, hey, this isn't in us.
We get Mark Breslin to lead them all then,
Exactly.
I guess.
You know,
At least have
Steve mentioned Henny Youngman, you know, Rodney Dangerfield too, you know, these guys, you know, he'd get respect finally, you know, if he took over the country.
if Pat Paulson ran for Prime Minister, he couldn't win the presidency, but he'd probably do all right running for Prime Minister.
I think it'd be fun.
Well, I think that you guys are touching on this politics and humor. I think humor is what you're trying to tell a story with. Am I not correct for each of you?
No. Not for him, not for him. Yeah, I am.
I mean, you use humor to get a message across. Is that not correct? Starting with you, Steve.
I try. I write humor because I love humor. I love to laugh, and in most situations that I run into, something humorous strikes me. And even in a lot of the straight news that I wrote, I often tried to slip in a humorous line. So yeah, but beyond that, beyond the ridiculous lies a point of the sublime, at least, I guess, because I always try to say something in my humorous writings.
And Bill, you call it the humor-impaired people that don't appreciate humor for what it's worth.
Personally, I think that humor impairment is a major handicap in society nowadays. People that either have lost their ability to laugh, lost their desire to laugh, or maybe never had that ability at all. And there is just so much to laugh at nowadays. Today we've got teachers on strike in Surrey as well. That's 56,000 teachers or students in Vancouver that are disadvantaged right now. Now we've got another 44,000 in Surrey. It's close to 100,000 students, and you've got to laugh when you realize that, you know, in a few years' time, even the teachers' picket signs are going to be misspelled.
Right. And John, you don't put humor into your columns, but I think certainly a lot of the subjects people take as humor. They don't take it for real, and they don't believe it. How do you cope with that, and what's your belief?
Well, well, certainly there is an element here that you could take this as distracting, and I have to be very careful when I write these stories. If I become too much of an advocate for these points of view, I think they'll suffer. But I do write these straight, and to be honest with you, my real longing is to write humor. I've had some very bizarre personal experiences. For instance, I went to the Great Pyramid of Egypt, which someday may be featured in one of my stories, describing how I actually am the perfect length of the sarcophagi in the grand chamber inside. I don't know what this means, but I found out after laying in it that that's where all the guides pee. When I got to the top of the Great Pyramid, these stories are true. I think they need to be told to put everything in their context, because everyone goes, you know, like the pyramids, so woo-woo. Yeah. When I climbed to the top of the Great Pyramids, I found on top of it a well-formed stool. Someone had actually pooped on top of the pyramid. I mean, I traveled a fifth the way around the planet to see this. Not the poop, but the pyramid. So you have to sort of undermine yourself a bit to maintain some kind of credibility in all this. You can't take yourself totally seriously, and I think you're going to see humor just creeping into my work, although I'm careful not to make fun of the people I've dealt with. Some of them have come to me with, particularly the contactees and the abductees, and they're having very, very strange things happen to them. And to treat them frivolously is the greatest insult, I think, to them. So I think there is humor in all this, in my writing. And as any reporter, and as Steve indicated, there is a real wanting to kind of lighten up on some of the stuff you end up writing for the, you know, after a while, it's a bit much too. So humor is definitely a real important part. If you don't have humor in your writing somewhere, I think it all suffers. And so do the readers on account of that too.
Never having been a reporter myself, you know, it must be tough for either of you when you're reporting a factual story and you find yourself saying, yeah, there is humor in this.
Well, it's really tough when you think of a great line and you just can't use it.
Just throw the story off, and at least people will think you're...
Oh, I use them all the time. The editor takes them out. You throw a few in there. I mean, you get lippy now and then. But you have to run it, particularly in court stories. I had some fun with some kids up from Surrey. I'm very careful what I say here on TV, but they were arrested for ramming shopping carts at midnight out in the mall. And what they had done the day before is ripped off 3 or 4 of the local grocery stores here for $3,000 worth of cigarettes. And I asked one of the people in the gallery, why didn't you run out? Why didn't you get out of here? And she said, well, we were just having fun. I mean, I just wrote that straight. I mean, if you don't think that's funny, I mean, that didn't have to take any. Just play that one straight, and it'll get its own laugh. So yeah, I think even in the most pathetic cases, there might be a room for humor.
Well, you were saying the same thing the other day. I mean, the crooks of this world seem to be the stupidest people.
That's undoubtedly the case. You know, you got a guy in Vancouver. Recently, he robbed a bank, and he wrote the hold-up note on the back of a personalized check. You know, so the police are waiting for him when he gets home. You know, if we had really intelligent criminals, the justice system would be further burdened. Because we're incredibly lucky that criminals are basically stupid people.
At least the average one.
Well, yeah. I guess the smart ones don't get caught, you know, and everything.
No, the smart ones become politicians.
Yeah.
What sort of feedback do you get from your stuff when it appears in either the Review or the Express or?
I usually get. I'm surprised by the feedback. I get pretty positive stuff most of the time, and I'm surprised by the range in ages and types of people that read it and report back to me.
No, I was just saying not all of your columns are humorous. You did a story here
Thanks
in
a lot.
Nelson back in
Creep.
1987 about down south.
Yes.
I was just leading
That was
into
intended to be humorous.
Nice segue.
Just take a shot of that.
I think most Nelsonites will remember that headline from how many years ago was that? 5 years now.
87.
That was in 87, yes.
On a more serious vein, you actually went down to the Aryan Nation camp in the Oregon, was it?
Idaho.
Idaho.
Maiden Lake.
And subverted yourself into the organization to do a story on that. And that was more serious journalism.
And you didn't get good follow-up reviews from people on this one. You were saying had a couple of letters.
I didn't get good reviews from the Aryan nations. They thought that my grammatical structure was really poor and that my lead sentence was really boring.
Were you threatened at all?
Yes, I was threatened. I got a couple of threatening letters. One was from a warrior, an Aryan warrior. Another was from some jerk in Victoria. I don't know who it was. I hope you're watching. And at the time I was living in an apartment building, and my landlord knew about this, and he did me the favor of building a crate in the backyard about 12 feet by 12 feet out of 2x4s and getting a chain with links about, I don't know, 8 inches long, and running the chain from the crate into the house to make it look like we had some kind of a tiger that lived in the apartment building. And for a couple of months I slept with a shotgun under the bed.
Seriously?
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah.
But I didn't expect anything to happen, and nothing ever did. So it worked out okay. I figured I was basically small potatoes to them. But a couple of guys were, I guess, kind of angered by, they thought I was deceitful.
By
pretending that I was interested in their cause and then writing about it.
But you say you still get reaction from the local community from that
Yeah,
article
of all the stories that I've written over about 10 years of writing in Nelson, that's the story that people seem to remember.
What do you guys want to do when you grow up? Now, seriously, now you just not retired, but given up your dental practice this month.
Yeah.
What do you want to continue the writing field?
Well, I don't know. It's something that's worth sort of kicking around for a while and seeing what's in it. I'm doing right now. What I'm doing it is for the sheer fun of it. I backed into it, and I suppose I might end up having to back out of it, but I'm just having a whole lot of fun right now. You know, I may go down to Hayden Lake as well, you know, find out Steve never really did write, why, you know, how they KKK guys actually get their sheets so white.
So
you know, I got to find this stuff out and everything. I don't think they're much for racists, but they're pretty good on laundry. And we gotta find these things out.
Well, this is
if any of them are incontinent, then their sheets are stained, obviously. So
this is a job for the Joe D.
this
Natalie
society,
Center for
yeah.
Study of
Oh yeah,
Aberrant
exactly. Yeah.
Desirable
I hope
behavior.
it's on
Oh
your
yeah,
desk.
one of those. Yeah, it's just these guys probably fall quite well into our category of psycho-ceramic personalities, the crackpots. But no, what the hell? It's just something to do for a while. That's all.
Steve, what are your goals or plans within the field of journalism or writing?
Well, I'd like your job, Morrie.
You want
to do
Yeah.
this. Yeah.
Yes, all
Well,
right.
that shows motivation.
Break it to him, it's not a job.
By the way, we are unpaid volunteers here.
Yeah.
This is a job of love as well.
I'm working on a novel, and I hope to finish that within a year. When it's done, I'll probably throw it out and start something else. But I've thought about assembling all the columns that I've written and publishing them as a book.
Great.
Who knows?
And John?
Well, I'm hoping to survive my next month at the Nelson Daily News. That's my short-term view. Who knows what'll happen for that? I'm filling in for Patrick Fowler down there. When he returns, I'll be back on the streets as a stringer. But I have a couple of other projects that I've been kicking around for a number of years and spend more time talking about them than doing them. So that may focus me to work on. I have an historical novel that I'm working on about the Second World War with a fellow who was a German spy on the Eastern Front. And that itself might be a very interesting story to work on. So I may find myself continuing in writing, certainly filling in for news, and I'll be compelled, of course, to cover the fringes because they're getting bigger all the time as time goes on.
Just going to remind our viewers that they can call in and ask questions to you three guys. Our phone number is 354-4200 if you want to call in and ask these journalists, columnists, famous writers locally a question about how they do their job or anything else.
I'm also looking for a date for Friday night.
All right. If anybody's out there, the hockey game should be over by now, so that we might have somebody watching the show right now, and that might phone.
Maybe they could phone in the score.
Yeah, you can do that too. If you phone in the score, we'd appreciate that. It is a more informal show tonight than our normal one, so we're taking some liberties, I believe.
John, you brought some interesting information and pictures with you this evening.
Yes, I did. I hope you'll find them informative. The first one that we've got here is the crop circle in Britain. I don't know if your camera's on that right now or not. For those of you who aren't really familiar with the crop circle phenomenon, they began as simple circles in fields, and they evolved to fairly sophisticated geometric designs like this. Now, your first reaction looking at that is to expect it to be a hoax. That occurred a couple of years ago overnight in a field in Britain, and there has not been an explanation. No one has come forward to say they've hoaxed that particular one. Doesn't necessarily mean it hasn't been hoaxed, but the whole phenomenon has produced some really bizarre shapes, and there really isn't a proper explanation. There have been, as you've probably heard, the press tends to pick up the hoax angle very quickly and run with it, and that fits with their theme of kind of dismissing this phenomenon. Because I think if we began to believe that this really did appear overnight, doesn't have an explanation, it becomes extremely irksome to our view of what is making the planet tick. And at first, my reaction to this was, this is definitely the kind of stuff that can only be produced by drunk physics students on a carouse. But I've talked to quite a few people who've examined ones here in Canada, and we have produced some very state-of-the-art crop circles here in Alberta and Manitoba. And I believe from the kind of stories they tell that there's definitely something very strange to these things. And I won't say, I don't know really what it is exactly, but for instance, one that appeared not like the one that you're showing now, but a very simple circle that occurred out in near Milestone, Saskatchewan, I believe it was, just last summer. The fellow who examined it spent 4 hours circling this 30-foot circle, looking for, in a footstep or someone on stilts or any indication that someone had come in and actually done it. And he couldn't find anything there. This is after 4 hours on his hands and knees. He said he turned every stalk. And this again, I think that these are genuine things that need to be explained. Of course, like I say, the press tends to play them up as hoaxes, and they'll go with that, so that they don't tend to get the real kind of coverage they deserve.
Well, the scientific community, I mean, there must be Geiger counters or some sort of devices that could look for extraterrestrial?
Well, I think there is kind of legitimate scientific investigation going on, but there's a kind of a curse. Any scientist who takes this on, the logic is, oh, well, you must be a crank now that you're taking this seriously. But there has been some peer-reviewed analyses made of some of the plants that have been involved in these things, and they've revealed anomalies, oddities. They haven't been as extravagant as some have held, that there was evidence of radionuclides and all this stuff. That wasn't proven, but from my information. But there has been very strange alterations in the cell structure of these plants that is unaccountable for. And plus, they tend to grow, in many cases, with increased vigor after being compressed. And of course, there is the thing I wrote about that happened in Saskatchewan, too, where you had the phenomenon of the crushed porcupines in the circle, where they actually found a flattened, swirled porcupine. That, you know, what are you going to make of that? I don't know. I mean, that's what I like about these things. There's no real answer to it.
Well, in university you studied science. What did you learn?
Well, mostly all the subatomic particles, partly because there's mesons and leptons, and of course there's morons, photons, and croutons. No, well, actually we've studied these crop circles over at the Center for Study of Decidedly Aberrant Behavior, and we've really decided that these things are done by extraterrestrials. Highly motivated alien juvenile delinquents, you know, really, who think nothing of traveling halfway around the universe just to do wheelies in our fields. But
I wouldn't rule that out, Bill.
well, exactly, you know, this is the whole thing, you know, yeah.
From the Ninja Turtles.
Oh, Christ, anything's possible nowadays, you know, so we're still working on it too, and maybe John and I will team up on an article
Well,
one day.
there may be some room for this.
Tom may not be ready
some
for it.
collaboration in some of your columns, the three of you guys. In adding the humor, I mean, sitting down with you guys over coffee today, it certainly was contagious.
The flu?
Well, that's what you had.
That's why I wasn't there.
But you couldn't find the coffee shop.
I did make it in tonight, though, so
Yeah, very important.
follow instructions.
How do you guys go about sitting down and writing your columns? You've got to be in a humorous mood, or are you a little bit more maybe scientific mood? What do you sit down with NBC and your typewriter, or?
No, I've never done any substances to help me do my columns. I freebased Metamucil once, but it was just a regular rush. So, no, I'm an early morning person. I get up and usually am fairly creative, and I watch TV, I read newspapers, and sometimes I just get an idea. Somebody will say something and it'll tweak me, and it's surprising how easy it is to write 600 or 700 words, and sometimes it's tough to actually hold it back to that much. So that's why some of my columns take on sequels.
Part A, B, C, and D.
Exactly. You know, you get the rolling, and I find that if three handwritten pages for me is about 600 or 700 words, and that's what the editor wants. And I find it hard sometimes to stay at that. You know, sometimes it's tough to get things together too. You know, but usually, if you watch TV or read something, you know, it'll generally tweak you.
There's plenty of material out there if you're into it. Steve, what about you? Do you sit down at a typewriter or word processor or hand bomb your stuff, or how do you sit down and write your column, and how do you actually get ready for it?
I don't actually get ready for it, except that I let time pass, and about 3 or 4 hours before it's due, I know that I have to write something. So I sit down. Quite often I have a single idea. I think for the last column that I wrote, I had the idea of a guy who says to another guy, "That dog has no sense of humor." And that was it. And I sat down to write the situation that would create that line of dialogue, and I never did get to use that line, but the situation just evolved, and very often it's with a single idea, a single line, and I head for that, and often I get diverted away from it, but there's not much more to it than that.
Just a little bit of creative juices to keep it flowing.
I have a theory that creativity comes out of the work itself, because quite often when I sit down to write, I really don't feel very creative, and I don't feel funny at all. And I really don't want to do it, but I have to. So I start, and I think you could start by copying pages out of the phone book, and you get a story eventually if you because it seems to come right out of the keys of the typewriter or word processor, whatever you use, when you start using it. Sit on the couch and wait for inspiration to hit you, and you might as well turn on the TV. Watch something like this.
So, how about yourself, John? I mean, you're obviously guided by a little different force. Is it?
Yeah, it's called deadlines.
Yes.
You know, I typically exhibit, you know, copy deadline avoidance behavior as much as possible. And as a freelancer, I used to suffer from that for weeks, months at a time. But in the present circumstances where the editor simply says, I need 12 inches to fill this space on this topic starting now, it tends to take a lot of that anguish and hand-wringing. This becomes typing instead. And to follow on you know, Steve's remarks, that you don't necessarily hear the tinkling of the muses. It's often like, oh God. You start off, and somehow out of the process, you do end up writing something that's actually readable. And I've found that I've done some of my best writing under duress, under extreme pressure, under coming in. I haven't had a chance to think this through. The pennies haven't fallen on this story. I can't write this yet. And tick, 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 and they're standing there with the cigarette going away. The typesetter's going home in half an hour. And in that context, you often surprise yourself. So I think there's a mix there of being forced. I mean, it's like, you know, write, drag yourself in, do the work. And sometimes it comes out, I'd say sometimes it's garbage, but it's unpredictable too. I've often felt, I can't believe I'm such what a roll, this is so good. And a half an hour later, it's just faded off the page. It had nothing. So I mean, I don't trust myself when it's easy, and I don't know what to make of myself when it seems hard. Though the next day is you look at it and go, well, it reads. That's okay. That's a read, and it tends to work like that. It's a mix of work, mix of inspiration, but I think the main thing is grab the keyboard and write it. Go for it. Go for it. You have to do that.
We asked all of you if you'd be kind enough to read some of your work tonight, a section or an excerpt from one of the columns. And Steve, when you dropped off that one to do with the tequila cake, it had me in hysterics when I was reading it, and I noticed that's the one that you picked. Would you like to start and read just a portion of it? For the audience.
A portion of it.
Start from the top right to the bottom. All the way through.
Or the whole thing.
Yeah, we got some time here.
We got some time. I'll start from the top, and you give me the cut my throat when
We
you
got
want me
some
to
time.
stop.
Yeah.
I heard on the radio that BC Hydro is predicting periodic blackouts. I figure that's none of their business. What I do in my spare time is my problem. For instance, the other day I'm pretty sure I baked a cake. I believe this because when I woke up the next morning there was a cake in my kitchen. It was my favorite kind of cake, not one that you'll find at a bakery, so I must have baked it myself. It was a tequila cake. They're easy to make, hard to remember making, but easy to make. You get some ingredients, mash them all together in a pot, stick them in the oven, and fry them up real good. Then you get up the next morning and presto, you must have baked another cake. Because of obvious health risks, I don't recommend you make one of these cakes, but I'd like to get this recipe off my mind, if you know what I mean. Shall I continue?
Please. Yes.
First, get a bottle of tequila. Then you need some flour, some double-acting baking powder, whatever that is. I don't know what double-acting baking powder is, so I substitute tequila. You can also use some salt, sugar, butter, and milk and other stuff. Okay, pour a cupful of tequila. Now take a great big drink, then sit down for a while. As soon as you can, get up and find a large, shallow pan and bang it real hard on the stove for about 5 minutes. When your neighbor comes to your door to complain, tell him some meat went bad in the fridge. Don't say anything else. He'll leave and he won't come back for a long time. This is important in baking a tequila cake because you'll be making a fair amount of noise later on and you don't want to be disturbed. Okay, now, take another great big drink of tequila and get your flour and stuff together. My cookbook says you're supposed to shift the flour and salt and sugar together. Now what the hell does that mean? I don't know, so what I do, I take a great big drink of tequila. Now we're almost ready to bake our cake. You have to make sure that your oven door is sturdy enough for the job, so grab the handle and pull it wide open, then whack it against the stove about 50 times as hard as you can. If it doesn't fall off, your oven door is okay, but it's also important to make sure that no noise gets to your cake while it's baking, or the cake will fall off. Excuse me, I haven't read this in a while, so I've forgotten most of it. Okay, stick your head in the oven. If it's a gas oven, make sure it's turned off. Come to think of it, why not turn it off even if it's electric? With your head in the oven, yell as loud as you can for a while. Gradually, you should find that the sound goes away. If you can't hear anything after a while, your oven is soundproof and you can go ahead and bake your cake. If you can still hear yourself after 10 minutes, your oven is not soundproof, but that's all right. You can easily keep your cake from falling off by gluing it to the oven rack. By now your cup of tequila is probably empty, maybe twice. So just go ahead and fill up a mason jar. Take your ingredients and dump them in a bowl. If you don't have any double-acting baking powder, whatever that is, and you want to use some tequila as a substitute, make sure it's a glass or metal bowl because they take the heat from your stove better than plastic bowls. Dump a little tequila into the ingredients and put it on a hot burner. Stir it a bit and take a great big drink of tequila. If you find yourself unable to get off your knees while you're cooking, hit the stove with a shovel a few times, as I've found this is the best way to mix up the ingredients when tequila is applied. Okay, pour some tequila into that shallow pan so the cake will slide out easy after it's baked. Preheat your oven to about 1800 degrees and slip your cake in. Take a great big drink of tequila and sit down for a while. Turn your oven off first. Now all you have to do is wait. Your delicious tequila cake will be ready in no time. When you come to the next morning, you'll be really excited to check your tequila cake. So run to the oven and whip that door open. If you've properly tested it the evening before, it won't fall off. And inside will be your cake, just ready for eating. As I've made clear, it's easy to bake a tequila cake, even though you may have have to read the instructions again each time you go to bake one. However, because of the variety of delicious and nutritious ingredients, it's also easy to get it all wrong and wind up with something the seagulls wouldn't eat. But that's all right. You can always get more tequila.
You got good favorable comments. There were a lot of people making cakes that week.
Yeah, unfortunately nobody sent me any cakes. But,
Do you have a recipe for tequila icing?
you don't need icing with this cake.
It's got its own built-in icing.
What about the fiber content for the health conscious?
It's very low.
Good.
How about you, Bill? You've got something to add to this?
Well, I don't know if this is something you want to hear, but I do a number of formats when I write, and this one I'm going to read a couple excerpts from something I call the tabloid's tabloid. It's a super tabloid. It's stuff that's written that it's stuff that even the tabloids won't touch. And I'll give you some idea.
Will the CRT touch us for this one?
In fact, Jacques Parizeau, I think it was, it said Joe G. Natalie is destined to be a savior. When he was born, everybody that saw him said, Jesus Christ. Anyway, Palestinians were worried recently when it was reported that a plane carrying Yasser Arafat had been lost in the Sahara Desert. Joy and elation were restored the next day when it was revealed that while Arafat had been killed in the crash, he had been immediately reincarnated and then time traveled back to the present. While Palestinians cheered his triumphant return, Arafat began writing his memoirs, tentatively to be produced as a Hollywood musical, with the opening lines of the theme song, Yasser, he's my baby. No, sir, I don't mean maybe.
No.
Yasser, he's my baby now. And following that up, when scientists at the National Research Council have announced that the gene for human stupidity has finally been isolated. Researchers report that the gene is not attached to the DNA chain as was expected. It is instead attached to the inside of the left big toe. The gene will now be scanned for at birth, and parents will be given the option of having it removed from their children at that time. In the meantime, running shoes for serious weightlifters, boxers, and professional wrestlers will be made with extra padding in the left shoe. Footwear for politicians will similarly be altered as soon as Senate approval is received. Now you can see why nobody wants to publish this, and everything. But
there is Frank magazine you could probably get into.
Well, possibly, And following that one up, Federal Finance Minister Don Mazankowski today tabled new legislation to extend the goods and services taxability to include exorcist fees, bribes paid to civic officials, and ransoms paid for victims of kidnappings. Mazankowski also stated that he'd go barefoot in the House of Commons pending Senate approval of new footwear standards. And, well, one more anyway.
Go.
Federal Justice Minister Kim Campbell, I wrote this a little while ago,
right.
Has outlined her plans to legalize crime in Canada. She stated, since we spend more on policing, courts, prisons, and the like than criminals get away with, we could actually afford to pay criminals not to commit crimes. We charge criminals $50 per crime for a crime permit, thereby increasing federal revenues and keeping track of what the criminal community was up to. And since crime would then be considered a job of sorts, there'd be a significant number of criminals who'd stop committing crimes out of principle. Campbell declined comment on the criminal's eligibility for unemployment insurance and welfare benefits in times of a depressed crime market. I think you've heard enough.
Oh gosh, you guys, I know at least both of you two guys seem to sometimes take shots that would be considered not politically correct. How do you deal with that?
Well, political correctness is something that belongs under the person hole cover in the sewer. I don't see it as being very sensible and certainly very necessary. I think we pay an enormous number of tax dollars to people who then it's their sole purpose to sit and dream up new rules for political correctness. And the world got along fairly well without political correctness. And we don't have to have gender neutrality when we're discussing things that just don't need it.
All right. How about you, Steve? I know you've taken some shots from a couple of people in some of your columns, just to history.
Yeah. A few people have written or called and complained about some of the, well, not so much about the terms that I've used, but about the subjects of my columns, mainly. But as far as political correctness goes, I have a lot of disregard for it. I think it's garbage, really, made by people with improperly fitted left shoes. Really, a lot of humor depends on rhythm and word structure, and having to insert personhood instead of whatever you were going to use. It can really foul up the rhythm of a joke, and to me the humor is far more important than not offending anyone. I'd rather offend everybody but make them laugh than be polite and not make anyone laugh. And if they don't like what I write, well, they must be stupid.
Humor impaired.
Yeah.
I'm trying to read his.
John, it's your turn to do a reading.
Well, on a more somber note, this was actually a story that, of the Fringe series that was close to home, and it actually wrote about someone that a lot of people knew. And I'll read part of it here. Hannah Moore is a kind of regular at Chiller's neighborhood pub on the North Shore. What makes her unique is that she's been dead since 1959. Last year, Linda Rack and Liz Cowenhoven bought the pub. They got the land, the house, the liquor inventory, the chairs, tables, glasses, ashtrays, and Mrs. Moore's ghost. She came with the place, said Cowenhoven. The two new pub owners got to know Mrs. Moore over the last year, although unlike some patrons, they've yet to see her. We know she has a sense of humor, and we think she likes men, says Cowenhoven, who's noticed that certain feminine articles of clothing regularly disappear from the clothes dryer upstairs where she and Rack live. Bartenders experience pranks too. Shopping lists on the wall disappear. Shot glasses go in the dishwasher at one end, but don't come out the other. Cigarette lighters come and go of their own accord. A heavy old fire door that, since it had been changed, used to open and close on its own. We used to say Mrs. Moore is just stepping out when the fire doors would open, says Linda Saliken, who tended bar at Chiller's a few years ago. We always sensed a coolness before the door opened. It was refreshing. We never felt threatened. We joked about Mrs. Moore. We felt she was friendly. She never bothered anyone. Sokolicki says she once saw a ghostly woman standing at a pub window late at night after hours, but a patron that she served once had a much closer experience. The man, a traveler from out of town, unaware of the ghost stories, came out of the men's washroom looking embarrassed and telling Sokolicki that he had surprised an elderly woman on the toilet. He thought perhaps it was a woman from the nearby Willow Haven Hospital who was a little confused. After waiting for the woman to come out, which she didn't, Sokolicki went in. The washroom was empty. Judy Dodge, one of the previous pub owners, watched a lady in a blue gown float through the wall of the woman's washroom. Mrs. Moore's past is almost as intriguing as her present. Daisy Lee, who remembers Hannah from the late 40s, says Nan was a trained nurse, kind, Welsh, eccentric, and fey. If anyone could come back as a ghost, it would be her. Mrs. Moore was Alfred's second wife. Alfred Moore left his family in the late 20s and built the house at 6 Mile for him and Hannah in 1930. Moore had an abiding fear of being buried alive and requested upon his death that his wrists be cut to make sure there was no pulse. This is happening in our own neighborhood, by the way. He also insisted he be buried above ground, and Hannah built a mausoleum near their house after her husband's death. Mr. Moore died of a heart attack on the ice at the Nelson Summer Curling Bond spill in 1949. Hannah Moore died of a stroke at Kootenay Lake District Hospital in 1959. According to Lee, Mrs. Moore often spoke of how she and her husband would reside in perpetuity in their mausoleum. The two were especially embalmed and resided in their bronze and oak coffins until the mid-80s, when members of Moore's family moved the couple and buried them in a cemetery. The mausoleum was dismantled and the bricks used in a nearby house. If anything would unsettle Hannah, it would be that, says Lee.
Wow.
And that's in your own neighborhood.
This is at Schiller's Pub.
You don't have to go to the fringes very far to find out this stuff.
Has any spaceships landed locally?
Well, there have been, yeah, part of my reason with what I'd hoped when I started the story is I would coax some people out of the woodwork. And I have come across a number of stories, even in Queens Bay where I live. There's a woman there that in the 1960s stood with her neighbors and watched a very large craft hover over what we call the Balfour Knob and stay there for quite a while. And then in a shimmering kind of phenomenon that fell from the spaceship down to the ground, which has been reported on many other sites. It did that and then disappeared. A number of other friends, including a reputable lawyer in town and as well a dentist, who at this point don't think want to be named publicly, did describe how they were out on, I think it was Slocan Lake, one night and saw some very strange lights come down and perform some aeronautical maneuvers that would defy, I think, any sort of norm. Quit moving that around like that. That's the real thing. And what you're seeing there, that was Billy Myers from Switzerland, actually.
This wasn't the spaceship that appeared locally?
No, we don't have any footage of that right now. But this is photographic work that comes from Switzerland for a man who became quite popular and actually developed a bit of a cult thing. And one of the things of the many people I've interviewed, any of them that start showing signs of a cult agenda or some other political thing, I immediately back off and find that there's usually something that's corrupted their whole thing. And I think near the end, even the Billy Myers phenomenon became kind of, a lot of people try to come in and make money off this man. The book may be an example, I don't know. But there are some very compelling photographs like that. And people in this community have seen things like that and are not afraid to come out and talk about it. There is also a group of people who are very far out there who I have been able to sort of find out some about, who believe in the massive conspiracy theory that's linked to the great gray government and the abductions and the American military and the CIA, and they've lined their homes with copper to keep the messages.
This local people?
Yeah, they've done this kind of thing. I mean, there is a sort of a crank element out there. There's talking to a CBC radio reporter said we often get people that come in and take their hats off and show us the aluminum foil in their hats and goes, "See, you're not getting to me." With their hats back on. My people are disturbingly normal. They tell things that really are not from people that I think have had their circuits unplugged or something. They're the real thing.
The people that you've met locally?
Yeah, there are quite a few
You don't
locally.
dismiss them?
No, not at all, actually. I mean, there's no reason why, I don't see why there would be a motive for them to mislead me in any respect. And often I have to coax the stories out of them. Like I say, it's the ones that are advocating some agenda. And there's fellows going around saying the Pleiadians are down here. And one guy's, overall this space stuff is a denial of the Holocaust. Like he's actually advocating bigotry from outer space. And a lot of people have fallen into this, you know, I actually believe, well, they're going, well, all the other things he says are okay, so we'll believe him there. So there's a whole, like there's both sides of this story, and I'm trying to steer a reasonable course in the center of all this stuff, because there's the fringe, and then there's paranormal, and then there's the abnormal, and sometimes it's out there too.
Again, being a journalist yourself, Steve, as well, you learn also to be a little bit cynical when you hear people's agendas, because often cases, not only in writing about space stories or writing humor, or when you're dealing with people as a journalist, you find that people have agendas to you that they're trying to get across to you.
I think that's really, really true. I find that at the paper especially. I mean, I've heard everything from people coming on to me with yanking my cord about Satanism to septic fields, and you know, you have to watch.
There's a connection?
There may very well be. They tend to draw you into their agendas. Now, some of them actually, I think, are telling very compelling stories, and that's the most disturbing, when you actually believe someone's story, and there's little you can do about it at this point. The story, as a reporter, you're not to advocate, But, and I think that cynicism is part of a distancing technique so you can still go home and get a sleep at night like you need to. I don't know how, when you were reporting at the paper, if you found yourself, people come to you to use you to get something quite often, or to come in with a real story, but nevertheless you have to sort of back off a bit to insulate yourself from what you're seeing all the time.
Yeah, that people were always, any reporter is going to be inundated by people with agendas and requests, and in my case I just listened to them all and promised them usually promised them I'd write a story about whatever they had to say and then forgot about it.
And do a column on them.
Which explains why I don't work there anymore.
And Bill, here's a little different story. Here you're doing this for fun and for enjoyment. Just to change the subject, just briefly, what do you plan on doing aside from writing over the next little while? You're only 40-odd years old now. You were a dentist for 15 years. Are you going to retire?
No, I don't consider it retirement. I consider it a break, basically. It's time to take a holiday, and maybe, I don't know, I don't think it's selfishness. I think it's more respect for one's own self-esteem, to start sort of saying, hey, it's my needs that are important as well. And meeting others' needs is a gratifying thing when you're successful. But one's own needs are important as well. And it's, I just decided it's time, and it's I think a very opportune time to do that. And certainly it's not like I'm burning my diploma and everything.
Great.
I'll land on my feet.
Great. And John, I know you've been to other careers in the past while. You had a tree planting company, and now you're working for the Daily News. And what do you see your long-term goal other than writing the book? Do you plan on doing any other writing work?
Oh no, I think that when I gave up the business, the running the contracting business, which I liked for many reasons, but the main problem is I never spent any time close to home. So I think what I'm going to do here is stay with the writing thing and whatever I can keep up with that, and try and stay home. I think there's a lot of quote old latent potential in this community, and it's only increasing as time goes on. I mean, someday, Morrie, we're going to have a TV station here, and we'll all be, we've got our foot in the door already, eh? I mean, I'm just saying things are happening in this community, and I think it's a great spot to be. It's going to be lean. I don't think there's a lot of money to be made yet, but there's opportunities out there, and I'm going to stick with the writing thing.
Steve, you plans to be local and explore other writing potentials locally?
Yes, actually. I've lived in a number of places across Canada, and Nelson is the first place that I found, and I found it 10 years ago, that I've not wanted to leave after a few years. I really like Nelson. I really like the people here in the area. And writing is the only thing that I'm fit to do, really. Some people would argue that I'm not fit to write either, but I think I am, so to heck with you. So yes, to answer your question.
Remain within the community and try and eke out a living doing that, and if you can complete this book, maybe that'll be the next goal.
Huh?
Huh?
Were you talking to me? Yeah, I guess so, yeah, Morrie.
Did that not come out?
Yes.
Write to complete your book and see if that can get published.
Buy my book.
We'll buy your book, and the name of the book is?
I don't know yet.
Okay, when it finishes.
Yeah.
But all you guys are really enjoying the writing end of life, the creative juices that
Seem to be enjoying life, period.
Yes.
And we're all really good writers, too.
Thanks, Steve. I needed that. Yeah, listen to him.
Well, it's certainly been a pleasure talking to the three of you. Our next show is scheduled for when?
2 weeks.
2 weeks from now, and you guys will be on again next time, right?
We'll just say the same things over again.
It's about those writers. Yeah, I wanted to ask one of them this question.
Yeah, by the way, thanks for the phone calls.
Yeah. Well, normally we do get a call here and there, and when we don't, we have somebody in the back booth there phone in, and I guess they're asleep over there.
Why don't we phone them this week?
We have 30 seconds left.
30 seconds?
One thing about doing a program like this, they can't complain about your spelling.
Major problem in the newspaper business. There's something wrong with the spell checker or the editor or something like that.
There's always something wrong with the editor.
Yeah, I think so.
John, what if my septic tank is possessed? How do I tell?
Well, for a small fee,
what-
I'll come and we'll do an exercise or an exorcism.
If I don't
Exercise
if I don't pay you for that exorcism, will it get repossessed?
Thank you very much, everybody.
Sorry,
It's been a pleasure having
Who
the
writes
three
your
of you.
material?
I'm not sure.
It's been a pleasure having the three of you. It's been fun having this show going. I'm glad you guys could come to it.